Welcome back to Philadelphia Airport. A few months have passed since our last visit and things remain dynamic. The day has finally come after years of planning, months of rumors and many confidential meetings. JetBlue has finally opened their new hub at the airport. PHL isn't for the faint-hearted, as we have found out over the past few months. With the move of JetBlue to open a base at the airport follows also the move of the airline's operations from Terminal 1 to Terminal 3. This frees up capacity at Terminal 1 but increases the workload over at Terminal 3 considerably. That, apart from the new JetBlue activities, of course still needs to handle the existing traffic. American Airlines, the biggest customer, still hasn't made any public statement, but adjustments to the airline's schedule could be a sign of the airline preparing for the new competition. Over at Terminal 1A Pier, we find Frontier Airlines, another airline with a base at PHL, but for sure at a smaller scale. One of the airline's A321neos has a few minutes ago arrived from Tampa. Luggage is currently being offloaded off the aircraft that soon will be prepared for its next flight heading to Denver. In the ramp next to the A321, we find an Airbus A320neo of Frontier Airlines that earlier today arrived from San Juan and now is ready to be pushed out of the ramp for a flight to Boston. All preparations are done, the jet bridge is retracting and the pushback truck is ready to go once the clearance has been given. Not quite as far are the ground crews around the Airbus A321 of Delta Airlines that still are pushing hard to make the outbound flight to Atlanta on time. The aircraft that arrived earlier this afternoon from Minneapolis is right now being loaded with last pieces of luggage before it can head out again. Taxiing towards the runway right now is this Airbus A319 of United Airlines that has been deployed on the route between Chicago and Philadelphia today, but things on the ground haven't quite run as planned here in Philadelphia due to some no-shows, which meant some luggage had to be loaded off. The result is a about 20-minute delay. Connecting Boston with Philadelphia today is this Delta CRJ 900. The aircraft arrived around 25 minutes ago from said destination and is now slowly being prepared for the outbound flight. Passengers should soon be starting boarding here around this aircraft. The JetBlue move from Terminal 1A Pier to Terminal 3 opens up capacity at Terminal 1. Time will tell how and who will fill it, but today American Airlines is at least using a bit of the free capacity on the tarmac, as a CRJ 900 of American Eagle has been parked over here. Passengers and crew are still being processed through Pier B, which means everyone is being brought to the aircraft by bus. This has slowed down operations slightly, but enough to delay the departure of the flight scheduled for Richmond. Now over at the B Pier of Terminal 1, we of course find much more American Airlines traffic. For example, this ERJ 175 of American Eagle. This aircraft arrived around 25 minutes ago from Memphis and is now being prepared for its next flight. This will bring the aircraft to Toronto in Canada. Next to the ERJ, we find a Boeing 737-800 of American Airlines that has quite a lengthy stay here at the airport. It arrived around 50 minutes ago from Chicago and has still 40 minutes left until its departure for Orlando. First preparations for that outbound flight have now begun as ground crews are slowly picking up work around the aircraft. Another 737-800 that will have a lengthy stay here at the airport is this 737-800 of American Airlines that has arrived not so long ago from Los Angeles LAX. In fact, the last pieces of luggage are still being offloaded. Later this afternoon, just around 4 o'clock, o'clock p.m., the aircraft will be heading out to Charlotte. Here at the B pier of Terminal 1, we do also find the American Airlines partner airline Alaska Airlines that has sent one of their 737-800s on the daily Seattle rotation. The aircraft still has around 20 minutes left until its scheduled departure, so ground crews are pushing hard in order to keep the aircraft on track and make sure that it leaves on time. One of the international arrivals today is this Dreamliner, the 787-8 of Royal Jordanian, that earlier this afternoon arrived from the Jordanian capital Amman. This is also where the aircraft will be returning to, and right now there is still about 50 minutes left on the clock until the scheduled pushback. So also here things are picking up with ground crews loading first cargo and luggage. Catering is at the scene as well as a fueling truck. Despite also having been deployed on intercontinental traffic, the 787-9 is experiencing a much more calm scene around itself, given that the aircraft arrived early this afternoon from Lisbon and all preparations around that inbound flight have been completed. The outbound flight is not scheduled until later this evening, where the aircraft will be heading out to London Heathrow. So right now this is pretty much the calm before the storm, and despite its lengthy turnaround time, it does look like the aircraft will be left here in the stand until then. In the stand next to the Dreamliner, we then find a CRJ-900 of American Eagle. Having arrived just about 15 minutes ago from Charleston, the last pieces of luggage are still being offloaded here from the aircraft. Once that is all closed down, the aircraft will then be prepared for its next scheduled departure, set at about 45 minutes from now. Another aircraft that has arrived less than 15 minutes ago is this 737-800 of American Airlines that came in from Tampa. Last passengers are right now deboarding the aircraft, as well as luggage that is currently being offloaded. The next flight for this aircraft is set to be Chicago, with a scheduled departure time in 40 minutes time. Closing in on the last 20 minutes of its turnaround time is this Airbus A319 of American Airlines. This aircraft arrived earlier this afternoon from Burlington and will now continue on to Atlanta. Luggage is being loaded, boarding is about to start, so an on-time departure for this aircraft is still very much a possibility. That is also still very much on the cards for this Dreamliner, the 787-9 of British Airways. But to be fair, only having arrived fairly shortly ago from London Heathrow, the aircraft is still very much at the beginning of its turnaround. The aircraft is scheduled to leave for London Heathrow again at 20 minutes to 7 in the afternoon. So yeah, still plenty of time, but also still plenty of things that could go wrong during this turnaround. And taxiing past the British Airways Dreamliner on its way to its stand is the American Eagle ERJ-175, just coming in from Atlanta. Later this afternoon, it will be heading out to Lexington. After an early afternoon arrival from San Francisco, this Airbus A321neo of American Airlines has temporarily been parked over here at one of the remote stands, as the aircraft is not scheduled to return until active service until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, with a flight to Las Vegas. At 20 minutes past 10 in the morning, this 767-300 freighter of UPS arrived in Philadelphia on a flight from Ontario. This is also where the aircraft is scheduled to return to. However, the original flight plan indicated at 12 minutes past 2 departure. That time long past, nothing has happened around the aircraft and no new flight plan has been filed. So what the situation exactly is around the aircraft, nobody really knows at the moment. After having arrived on an inbound flight from Miami, this Airbus A321neo of American Airlines has been taken out of the active service and placed into the airline's tactical reserve. This is, however, of course, just a temporary thing, as the aircraft will return into active service later this afternoon with a 10 minutes past 4 departure for San Francisco. Taxiing past the American Airlines flight is the TAP Air Portugal Airbus A330-900neo that has just arrived from Lisbon, the Portuguese capital. This is, of course, also where the aircraft will be returning to later this afternoon at 5:30. However, the aircraft first needs to make its way over to its stand at Terminal 2. Also just arriving, and also an Airbus A330, however of the 300 variant, and with a 25-minute delay is this Virgin Atlantic just coming in from London Heathrow, and this aircraft will now be taxiing over to its stand at Terminal 3, before it then will be returning to London Heathrow at 20 minutes to 5 in the afternoon. Before we head to Terminal 2 and 3, we can make a quick stop at the Bongo Inn. The hotel is today the venue for a quite exciting meeting, at least in the eyes of the airport management. The meeting between PHL Airport and Southwest Airlines is conducted behind closed doors, but sources close to the matter have confirmed that there are increased talks about the airline once more increasing its presence at the airport. We head back out to the field, where we find an ANA 777-300ER taxiing towards Terminal 2. The airliner, being a real highlight for local spotters, has just arrived from Tokyo Haneda Airport, and spotters will hope for a gate position facing the fences for the opportunity to get some nice pictures. Potentially soon the neighbor of the ANA could be this Austrian Airlines Boeing 777-200ER that is sitting here in the ramp. The aircraft has, of course, earlier this afternoon arrived from Vienna, the Austrian capital, and this is also where it will be returning to. The scheduled departure time is in 40 minutes time, so things are heating up around the aircraft in order to get it ready. After a successfully completed inbound flight, this 787-9 Dreamliner of Turkish Airlines is now being pushed out of the ramp, as the return flight to Istanbul isn't set until around 8 o'clock in the evening. So to free up space around the terminals, the aircraft is now being pushed out and being towed over to a remote stand for the time being. And that's a good thing, as another spotter highlight is arriving here at Terminal 2 in form of the 757-200 of Iceland Air in one of their spectacular special liveries. The aircraft that has just arrived from Reykjavik has only 45 minutes left on the ground until its scheduled departure, so turnaround time is definitely tight and ground crews will have to work hard to get it out on time. Only 5 minutes later is the scheduled departure time of this TUI Fly Belgium 787-8 Dreamliner that has been flying in from Brussels on a summer charter flight. However, as the aircraft has arrived quite a bit earlier this afternoon, the turnaround overall is of course much more relaxed. Still, ground crews need to pick up pace here if they want to make it in time. From the smallest Dreamliner, we move on to the biggest Airbus, the Airbus A380 of Qatar Airways, that actually has an identical departure time as the toy Dreamliner. The Qatar Airways, however, of course, flying to Doha, and given that they have about the same amount of time until the scheduled departure, things are definitely also heating up around the mighty A380, as still plenty of luggage and cargo needs to be loaded. Catering is also still at the aircraft, and boarding, of course, hasn't started just yet, but hopefully within the next 10 to 15 minutes. A little less time until its scheduled departure has the 787-9 of Etihad Airways bound for Abu Dhabi. So also here things are heating up. Ground crews are really pushing to ensure an on-time departure. Currently, luggage and cargo is being loaded onto the aircraft, and boarding is about to start in just 5 minutes time. That has been confirmed by the ground handling crew. But now let's head over to T3 to see what's going on over there. JetBlue is of course to become a common sight at Terminal 3, it is still being used by many South American airlines as well as SkyTeam members. Falling under the first category is Arajet, that has arrived from Santo Domingo with one of the airline's 737 MAX 8s. The inbound flight is still being handled by ground crews, and once that is done, work for the return flight will begin. Neither South American nor a SkyTeam member, and yet still a most welcome sight here at the airport, is the Azor Airlines Airbus A321neo. The airline has made a return to Philadelphia. It has in the past been on and off coming into Philadelphia, and now the airline has finally decided to return again. The aircraft is now getting ready for the flight back to Ponta Delgada, being pushed out of the ramp just in time, as the South American airline and SkyTeam member Aerolíneas Argentinas is just arriving and ready to go straight into the ramp with their Airbus A330-200. The inbound flight from Buenos Aires will be remaining here for quite a time, until 10 minutes past 4 to be exact, when the aircraft will be returning to Argentina. Of course, the base opening of JetBlue with the move of operations to Terminal 3 is the biggest story at the airport at the moment, but there are still reports of passengers showing up at Terminal 1 for their JetBlue flights and hence having to rush over to Terminal 3 in order to make their flights. It will take a bit of time for everyone to get used to the new situation. Luckily, the passengers for this A220-300 of JetBlue still have a bit of time until their scheduled departure to Charleston, as the aircraft has just arrived from Orlando, and ground crews are literally just starting to handle this inbound flight, which means passengers still need to deboard and all luggage still needs to be offloaded. Quite the opposite situation is it over here at the ERJ-190 of JetBlue, as this aircraft is literally ready to go even ahead of time on a flight to New York JFK. However, as the time slots for JFK are pretty much precise and you can't wiggle around with it too much, the aircraft will simply need to wait here in the ramp until its scheduled departure time. Arriving ahead of its scheduled arrival time, and therefore quite luckily still being able to find an open ramp, is this Airbus A321neo of JetBlue that has just come in from Amsterdam. The aircraft will remain here at the airport until later this afternoon, when it will be flying out to Oranjestad. And just clearing the stand for the early arriving A321neo is this Airbus A321-200 of JetBlue. After it came in from Punta Cana, the aircraft will now be departing for Los Angeles, LAX. This Airbus A320-200 of JetBlue arrived 23 minutes past 2 in the afternoon from New York JFK. The aircraft is right now being prepared for its outbound flight, bringing it to Fort Myers. And as there are just under 15 minutes left on the clock, ground crews really do need to push on here with this aircraft in order to get it out on time. With an early arrival, this Airbus A330-300 has given itself a bit more wiggle room around its turnaround time, although it is not really that tight. The Airbus A330-300 of Scandinavian Airlines has found its way over to the ramp here at T3 and will later this evening be heading back to Copenhagen, which means once the inbound flight has been cleared up, it will be pushed out of the ramp over to a remote stand in order to clear the gate area around the terminal. And it will be a similar story for this Boeing 777-300ER of KLM. Here the crew will be deboarding the aircraft fairly soon via a bus. And after the aircraft then has been closed down, it will also be pushed over to a remote stand in order to clear up the gate here and open up capacity for other inbound flights. Now, on our final stretch here at the airport tour, we can also quickly head over to the remote stands where we find this US Air Force C-17. This aircraft has arrived earlier this morning from Dover Air Force Base and has a scheduled departure later this afternoon, bringing it over the Big Pond to the RAF base Bryce Norton in the UK. And it looks like it won't be traveling alone, as the 747 freighter of National Airlines, coming in earlier this morning from Orlando, apparently also will be leaving around the same time as the C-17, also for RAF Bryce Norton in the UK. And with that, we have reached the end of today's airport tour. As this season comes to an end, we see an airport that continues to develop. JetBlue's base opening is a big success, but as we could learn, perhaps not the only one for the airport's future. What the future will bring remains to be seen, hopefully in a new season of PHL.